Grace's wedding was just 2 weeks away, and the entire city seemed to buzz with excitement. Her small apartment, usually neat and quiet, was now a whirlwind of activity. Invitations piled up on the table, wedding magazines scattered across the floor, and colorful fabrics swirled through the air as seamstresses worked on her bridal dress. At the center of it all was Tayo, Grace's best friend since childhood. Tayo was the kind of person who could handle anything, calm under pressure, organized and fiercely loyal. She had taken on the role of Grace's unofficial wedding planner, making sure every detail was perfect, from choosing flowers to tasting cakes. Tayo had been there, often dragging Grace out of moments of panic with a firm but kind voice. The day of Grace's bridal shower arrived bright and lively. The room was decorated with balloons and flowers, soft music playing in the background. Grace sat in the center, glowing with happiness, surrounded by her closest friends. The atmosphere was warm and full of laughter, a perfect celebration before the big day. One by one, her friends presented their gifts. Each present was carefully chosen: sparkling jewelry, elegant scarves, and fragrant perfumes. Grace opened every gift with excitement, her smile growing wider with each thoughtful surprise. The room buzzed with joy, stories, and teasing about the upcoming wedding. When it was Tayo's turn, the mood shifted playfully. She stepped forward with a confident grin and handed Grace a neatly wrapped box. Grace opened it slowly, pulling out a pack of the most beautiful lingerie she had ever seen. The fabrics were delicate lace and silk in deep reds and soft pinks, designed to catch the eye and ignite passion. The other girls burst into laughter, some whispering jokes, others raising eyebrows in surprise. But Tayo didn't back down. She leaned closer to Grace, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "This," Tayo said, "is something you can wear to entice your husband on your wedding night. You want him to remember this forever." Grace blushed but laughed along, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. The gift was bold, unexpected, and somehow perfect, coming from Tayo, the friend who never shied away from speaking the truth, even if it made people uncomfortable. The wedding day arrived with all its grandeur. The sun shone bright, and the city seemed to celebrate with Grace and Chidi. Family and friends gathered in colorful attire, music filled the air, and laughter echoed through the hall. Grace moved like a queen, radiant in her dress, while Chidi stood proudly beside her, beaming with happiness. The ceremony went flawlessly. Vows were exchanged, rings slipped onto fingers, and cheers filled the room. The reception was a whirlwind of dancing, speeches, and endless congratulations. Grace and Chidi barely sat down, caught up in the excitement and the constant attention of loved ones. By the time the celebrations finally ended, exhaustion settled over the couple like a heavy blanket. Their bodies ached from standing, smiling, and moving from one group of people to another. The adrenaline that had carried them through the day began to fade, leaving only tiredness behind. When they reached their bedroom that night, the silence was thick. The soft glow of the bedside lamp cast long shadows on the walls. Grace looked at Chidi, hope and anticipation in her eyes, but both knew the truth before words were spoken. "We're too tired," Chidi said quietly, sinking onto the bed. Grace nodded, a small smile on her lips. "Tomorrow," she promised softly. So the wedding night passed without the intimacy they had imagined. The morning after the wedding, Grace and Chidi woke up with hope for their first private moments as a married couple. But Chidi had a sudden errand to run and left the house quickly, promising to be back by evening. Grace watched him go, a mix of anticipation and nervousness stirring inside her. When Chidi finally returned that evening, Grace was ready. She had chosen one of the beautiful lingerie sets Tayo had gifted her at the bridal shower. The delicate lace hugged her skin, and she wore it with confidence, wanting to make this night memorable. Her heart raced as she waited for Chidi to notice. As soon as he entered the room, Grace smiled, inviting him closer. She slipped under the duvet, ready for the moment they had both been waiting for. But instead of the warm embrace she expected, Chidi pulled back, his face twisting in discomfort. "There's a smell," he said, wrinkling his nose. "It's making me uncomfortable." Grace's smile faltered. "What do you mean? Did you shower?" she asked, confused and hurt. Chidi's eyes narrowed. "I don't know, Grace, it just doesn't feel right." The tension exploded. Words were exchanged, sharp, angry, and full of frustration. Grace felt insulted, like her husband was accusing her of something shameful on their first night. Chidi felt confused and unsure, unable to explain the strange feeling that had taken over him. Their argument grew louder, voices rising in the small room. Neither was willing to back down, and the love they had shown all day seemed to vanish. In the heat of the moment, finally exhausted and bitter, they both turned away, retreating to opposite sides of the bed. The silence that followed was heavy and cold. That night, they went to sleep angry, the promise of their wedding night broken before it even began. A few days after the heated argument, Grace sat alone in her apartment, the silence around her, heavier than ever. She stared at her phone, finally dialing the number she had been hesitant to call. When Tayo picked up, Grace's voice was shaky, but desperate. "Tayo, I don't know what to do anymore," Grace said, her words spilling out. "Chidi won't touch me. Since the wedding, he keeps complaining about this stench. He says it comes from me, from down there." Tayo listened quietly, then spoke firmly. "Grace, don't panic. Sometimes men say things they don't. Fully understand, you need to show him you're still the same woman he fell in love with. Keep seducing him. Be confident." Grace sighed, hope flickering in her tired eyes. "But what if it doesn't work? What if he never comes around?" "Buy some good vaginal hygiene products," Tayo advised. "There are safe washes and creams you can use. I recommend brands like Summer's Eve or Vagisil. They're gentle and effective. Use them regularly. It'll help you feel fresh and confident." Grace nodded, feeling a bit better. "Okay, I'll get them tomorrow." Tayo smiled through the phone. "Trust me, Grace. Give it time and don't give up. You're stronger than this." Hanging up, Grace felt a spark of determination. She was going to fight for her marriage, no matter what it took. That evening, Grace went out with determination. She visited the store and carefully chose the best vaginal hygiene products she could find. Gentle washes, scented sprays, creams, everything that promised freshness. On the way home, she also picked up a few perfumes and lotions, anything to make herself feel clean and desirable again. Back in her apartment, Grace unpacked her new purchases and carefully followed the instructions. She sprayed the scented products over her skin, feeling the sharp, sweet smell fill the air. Then she slipped into one of the beautiful lingerie sets Tayo had given her, hoping it would remind Chidi of the woman he once loved. She waited for him, heart pounding, eyes fixed on the door. Hours passed. The clock ticked past midnight, and exhaustion wrapped around her like a heavy cloak. Just when she thought she might fall asleep, the door finally opened. Chidi stumbled in, the smell of alcohol thick around him. His steps were unsteady and his laughter was slurred. Grace stood up, ready to welcome him, but his face twisted into a cruel grin. "You think that will fix anything?" he sneered, eyes bloodshot. Before Grace could answer, the words hit her like a punch. "You're a smelly woman," he slurred, laughing harshly. "Your vagina stinks so bad, you should just drown yourself in a pool of deodorant." Grace froze, the pain slicing through her chest. Tears spilled down her cheeks as the cruel words echoed in the small room. She tried to speak, to defend herself, but the weight of his drunken insult crushed her voice. Chidi laughed again, louder, this time, and then stumbled toward the sitting room, collapsing onto the couch. Grace sat on the floor, her body racked with sobs. That night she cried alone, the dreams of love and happiness shattered, while Chidi slept off his drunken rage just meters away. The morning after the terrible night, Chidi headed to the office, his mind still clouded with anger and confusion. As he settled at his desk, his secretary approached cautiously. "Sir, there's an unexpected visitor here to see you. A woman named Tayo." Chidi raised his eyebrows, surprised but curious. He nodded and told the secretary to let her in. When Tayo stepped into the office, the calm smile she wore didn't match the storm she was about to unleash. Anyone would expect her to speak kindly of Grace, to defend her friend. But that wasn't why she was there. Without hesitation, Tayo launched into a tirade of lies. She painted Grace as careless and wild during their university days, accusing her of multiple abortions and reckless behavior. She claimed Grace was unclean, unable to maintain proper hygiene like a real woman. Tayo's voice dripped with venom as she told Chidi that Grace had no idea how to take care of herself. Then, with a cold smirk, Tayo shifted the story. She spoke about herself, how she was more beautiful, more desirable, and more pleasurable than Grace could ever be. The words cut deep, each sentence designed to make Chidi doubt the woman he had just married. The climax came when Tayo, ignoring Chidi's shocked protest, stepped forward and forcibly kissed him. Chidi pushed her away, refusing. With one last glare, Tayo turned on her heel and left the office. Throughout the day at the office, Chidi found himself unable to focus. Tayo's words kept echoing in his mind, each one twisting and turning like a storm he couldn't escape. But deep down, he refused to believe the cruel tales she had spun about Grace. He had known Grace for years, trusted her, and this sudden flood of accusations didn't fit with the woman he thought he loved. Still, the seed of doubt had been planted. As the day faded into night, Chidi made a decision. He wouldn't go home. Instead, he checked into a hotel nearby, needing space to think, to sort through the chaos in his head. Meanwhile, back at the apartment, Grace called non-stop. She called Chidi again and again, desperate for a word, an explanation, anything to break the silence. But Chidi ignored every call. Alone in the quiet apartment, Grace sat on the floor, tears streaming down her face. She prayed bitterly, pleading with God for guidance, for strength, for a way to save the marriage that was already slipping through her fingers. The night stretched endlessly, filled with sorrow and unanswered questions. The next day came, but Chidi still didn't call. Grace's heart ached with every silent hour. Feeling lost and alone, she reached out to the one person she thought she could trust, Tayo. Her voice cracked as she poured out her pain, the rejection, the harsh words, and the unbearable loneliness. Tayo listened patiently, letting Grace vent her frustrations and fears. Then, with a soft, comforting tone, Tayo suggested a way to lift Grace's spirits. "Why don't you come out with me and some of the other girls tonight? We'll have fun. Forget all this for a while." Grace hesitated but nodded. The idea of escaping the heartbreak, even for a few hours, was tempting. Maybe laughter and good company could ease the ache just enough to breathe again. The evening finally arrived. Grace dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that made her feel strong and beautiful. She wore her best makeup and a confident smile, hoping this night out with Tayo and the other girls would help her forget the pain, even if just for a little. While, as she approached the sit-out joint where they had planned to meet, Grace's heart lifted. But just a few steps away from the entrance, her world shattered. "You know Grace, she's a smelly woman," Tayo said, the cruel smile obvious even in her tone. "Her husband keeps telling me how bad she smells down there. No wonder they haven't been able to have sex since their wedding night." Grace's breath caught. The words stabbed her like a knife. She had trusted Tayo, confided in her, shared secrets she never told anyone else. And now those private moments were being used like weapons. The other girls joined in, their laughter echoing cruelly around the small circle. They whispered and mocked, trading secrets and lies as if they were trophies. One of the girls sneered. If a man like Chidi ever came for her, she'd be lucky if she could keep him. He's hot, handsome, and any woman would do anything to please him. The laughter grew louder, mocking and harsh, as the women traded cruel jokes and whispered insults. They talked openly about Grace's marriage, her private life, and the struggles she faced, all without a hint of mercy. Unseen, Grace stood just out of sight, her heart breaking again and again with every word. The pain was overwhelming, but beneath it burned a fierce anger. The woman she had called her best friend was the one who had torn her down in front of strangers. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound. Grace didn't say a word. Without confronting Tayo or the others, she turned on her heel and slipped quietly, away from the sit-out joint. The laughter and cruel words faded behind her, but their sting burned deep inside. Tears streamed down her face as she hurried to her car, hands trembling on the wheel as she drove through the darkened streets back to the apartment. Once home, Grace didn't stop crying. The weight of the night, the humiliation, and the heartbreak crushed her spirit. She barely noticed as she moved through the apartment, her legs carrying her almost without thought. In the bathroom, she filled the bathtub with warm water. Desperation made her pour in bottles of deodorant sprays, bubble baths, and fragrant oils, anything to wash away the shame and the pain. She slipped into the tub and let herself soak, the water turning silky and fragrant around her. As the minutes stretched into hours, Grace wept. Her mind replayed the cruel insults from Chidi, the biting words from Tayo and the others, and the loneliness that had become her constant companion. The tears didn't stop. The water ran endlessly, carrying her sorrow down the drain. Minutes later, Chidi arrived home. The door creaked open to reveal the quiet stillness inside. He called out Grace's name, his voice uneasy, but there was no response. The house felt empty, cold. He moved from room to room, the unanswered calls growing heavier with each step. Chidi's heart pounded as he followed the faint sound of running water to the bathroom. His breath hitched when he saw Grace lying motionless in the bathtub, her face pale and eyes closed. The water had nearly covered her, and it looked as if she had been drowning herself. Without hesitation, he reached in and carefully lifted her from the tub, cradling her fragile body in his arms. Her skin was cold and clammy, and his worry deepened. With every second, he carried her to the bedroom and gently laid her on the bed. Chidi moved quickly to clean her up, wrapping a soft towel around her trembling frame. His hands shook as he tried to soothe her, whispering her name, begging her to wake. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, he called a doctor immediately. Within minutes, a physician arrived, calm but serious. The doctor examined Grace carefully, checking her pulse and responsiveness. After administering some medication to help her recover, the doctor explained that Grace needed rest and care. He assured Chidi that she was stable, but stressed the importance of emotional support during such a difficult time. With a few final instructions, the doctor left, leaving Chidi and Grace alone in the quiet living room. Chidi sat beside her, his mind racing with guilt, fear, and a desperate hope to mend what was broken. About an hour later, Grace's eyes fluttered open. The world around her was soft and warm. She found Chidi sitting quietly by her side, his face full of concern and tenderness. Relief washed over her as she saw him there, a steady presence in the storm. Without a word, Chidi leaned down and gently kissed her forehead. The moment was quiet, but filled with unspoken promises. Slowly they drew closer, their hands finding each other's, bridging the distance that had grown between them. This time, the intimacy was different, patient, careful, and full of love. They finally consummated their marriage. Later that night, Grace woke in the middle of her sleep. She lay still, staring at Chidi's peaceful face beside her. Her heart swelled with gratitude, and she whispered a quiet prayer of thanks. After all the pain, the rejection, and the tears, her husband had finally agreed to hold her, to be with her. A shy smile crept across her lips. For the first time in weeks, she felt happy, truly happy. The next morning shattered the fragile peace with a sudden loud bang at the door. Chidi rushed to open it, but he wasn't prepared for what he saw. Tayo stormed in, her body covered in fresh, angry scratch marks. Her skin was turning bright red where she had clawed herself raw. She screamed out Grace's name, her voice wild and desperate. "Grace, you have to come out, please!" Grace, startled and scared, stepped out hesitantly. From her room, the sight of Tayo was terrifying, the self-inflicted wounds and the desperate look in her eyes. Tayo collapsed to her knees, tears streaming down her face as she begged, "Grace, I'm so sorry. I never wanted this. I was the reason Chidi couldn't sleep with you. I tried to stop your marriage because I didn't want you to be happy." Her voice broke as she clawed again at her arms and legs, tears mixing with blood. "Since I failed, I had to make sure neither of you would ever enjoy your marriage." The confession hung heavy in the room, raw and painful. Grace's own tears began to fall as she listened to the friend she once trusted reveal the cruel truth. With tears streaming down her face, Grace looked at Tayo, her voice trembling but steady. "Why, Tayo? Why did you never want my marriage with Chidi to work? How did you even manage to make him refuse to touch me?" Tayo's sobs shook her body as she finally broke down and confessed. "I was the one who liked Chidi first," she whispered, voice thick with regret. "We talked for weeks, just the two of us. I thought we were going to date, maybe even fall in love." She paused, swallowing hard. "Then I introduced you to him as my best friend. I wanted you to meet, but I didn't expect him to switch. All his attention to you. Just like that, he forgot about me. I was left alone, stuck on the single ladies' market while you two became this perfect couple." Tayo's eyes filled with pain and jealousy. "I was angry, hurt. I couldn't stand seeing you with him, happy and close. So I did everything I could to tear you apart." Grace stared, shock and betrayal mixing with the tears on her cheeks. The truth was more painful than any insult or lie. Her best friend had been her greatest enemy all along. Tayo's tears didn't stop as she went on, voice shaking with guilt and jealousy. "I did the whole thing. The smell, the way Chidi refused you. It wasn't just lies. I went to a witch doctor out of jealousy to ruin your marriage." Grace's breath caught staring at Tayo, disbelief mixing with horror. Tayo continued, "The witch doctor told me to buy a set of lingerie and bring it to her. I did exactly that. Days later, I returned to get the lingerie back. When she handed it to me, she warned me." Her voice dropped, trembling. "She said I had to make sure you wear that lingerie every time you and Chidi wanted to be intimate. If he ever successfully slept with you, I would bear the consequences." Tayo's eyes were wild now, the weight of what she'd done crushing her. "I didn't want to hurt you this much. I thought it would just slow you down, make you doubt yourself, but it spiraled out of control." Grace stood frozen for a moment, her chest rising and falling rapidly, her fists clenched at her sides. Then, without warning, she lunged at Tayo, her face soaked with tears and fury burning in her eyes. "You evil witch!" Grace screamed. "You ruined my life, my marriage. You cursed me." Chidi rushed forward and held her tightly, pulling her back. "Grace, stop! Don't hurt her, she's not worth it." But Grace thrashed in his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "Let me go. She used a witch doctor. She made me think I was disgusting. She made me feel like nothing. Let me go." Chidi tightened, his grip whispering gently, "It's not worth it. Please, just let her go." Breathing heavily, Grace turned to Tayo, her voice now sharp and cutting. "Get out! Get out of my house! I never want to see you again, never!" Tayo's eyes widened in panic. She stumbled backward, still scratching her arms and legs like her skin was on fire. "Grace, please, I didn't mean for it to go this far. Out!" Grace shouted, pointing to the door with trembling hands. Tayo turned and ran out of the apartment, her body still twitching from the endless itching. Her legs moved blindly, her hands clawing at herself. She didn't see the road ahead, didn't look left or right. And then a loud, brutal screech of tires. The impact hit like thunder. The car struck Tayo hard, throwing her to the ground. Blood pooled quickly beneath her as bystanders screamed and rushed toward the scene. Her eyes flickered for a moment, then faded. She died instantly, still scratching at her burning skin. Back in the apartment, Grace collapsed into Chidi's arms, sobbing with shock and heartbreak, the weight of everything crashing down in a single, devastating moment. A week later, the clouds that had hung over Grace's heart finally began to clear. She stood in the bathroom, staring at the pregnancy test in her hands. Her eyes welled with tears again, but this time they were tears of joy. She was pregnant. When she told Chidi, he swept her into his arms and held her close, both of them laughing, crying, overwhelmed. After everything they had been through, the lies, the pain, the betrayal, life had given them a new beginning. Never envy what someone else has, because jealousy turns friendship into poison. What you destroy out of bitterness can never bring you peace. And no matter what, never accept underwear as a gift, especially from someone who doesn't want to see you happy. You don't know what spirit they may be handing you. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. Share your thoughts below. And remember, every story carries a lesson. You never know who needs to hear it next. See you in the next one.